It's December 24th, 2018. Happy Christmas to those of you who celebrate it, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them down. Number 1, 7-year-old girl dies in custody of Border Patrol. The defining horror of the Trump presidency continues to be its treatment of immigrants and refugees. And since everything about Trump and his presidency is horrible, you know that the immigration policies and the enforcement of those policies must be absolutely monstrous. Most recent case in point, week before last, it was reported that on December 8th, a 7-year-old girl from Guatemala died after being picked up along with her father by agents of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. An autopsy is being performed, but the results of that won't be available for a few weeks. For now, the causes of the child's death are listed as septic shock, fever, and dehydration. Predictably and contemptibly, the Trump administration has placed the blame for the child's death on her and her father, describing it as the result of their decision to travel to the United States and attempt to enter the country illegally. Sure, shrug and blame the dead 7-year-old refugee on herself and her father. That's the American way, is it? Last week, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen testified before the House Judiciary Committee. She was questioned about the child's death and gave the same victim-blaming explanation. At one point, she was asked by Representative Hank Johnson how many migrants have died in the custody of the various agencies in her department, and Nielsen was unable to provide even an approximate figure. She said she'd have to check and get back to the congressman. These people give so little of a shit about the lives of immigrants and refugees that the Secretary of Homeland Security, mere days after a child had died in her department's custody, knowing that she was going to testify before a congressional committee, didn't even bother to bring the data on how many people have died on her watch with her. Representative Johnson also asked Nielsen if she believed that the undocumented immigrants coming to the border were human or subhuman. And Nielsen didn't even blink. She answered the question, and she said she believes they're human. And her words say one thing, but her actions, as well as those of the president she serves, say something quite different about that. Oddly enough, Nielsen didn't seem at all disturbed or surprised by Representative Johnson's question. It's almost as if she understood why he would have to clarify that particular point. Number 2, federal judges dismiss dozens of ethics complaints against Brett Kavanaugh. Last week, a panel of federal judges dismissed 83 ethics complaints against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, not because they determined Kavanaugh was innocent, and not because they viewed the charges themselves as frivolous. Quite the opposite. One of the judges on the panel said the complaints were very serious, but because they had no choice. Now that Kavanaugh sits on the Supreme Court, the panel has no legal authority to discipline him. That's nice, huh? So, all a judge guilty of gross misconduct has to do to avoid facing any penalty whatsoever for his behavior is get promoted? Because apparently not once in 230 years has anyone thought of establishing a disciplinary body with the statutory authority to oversee the Supreme Court? Who ever heard of a system where obviously corrupt, unfit men are allowed to thrive beyond the reach of the law? Whoa. Wow, did I just sound like a naive white guy there or what? Holy shit. Who ever heard of that system? It's called the United States, you doofus. Number 3, Tucker Carlson still Tucker Carlsoning. Just in case you'd forgotten that Fox News host and TV dinner fortune heir Tucker Carlson, seen here moments after being told they just sold the last package of Hemmer wedges to the guy in line ahead of him, was exactly the type of person who deserves to have angry people shouting outside of his house all day, every day. These last couple of weeks, he's been helpful enough to remind us. On his Fox News show week before last, after arguing falsely that there is no economic benefit to immigration, he attacked those who argue that the United States has, quote, a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. It's not immigrants that make the country more divided, Tucker. It's bigoted fucks like you. Advertisers began withdrawing their support from Carlson's show, so a few days later, Carlson opened his broadcast with a contrite, heartfelt apology. Nah, I'm just kidding. He doubled down on his Nazi bullshit. See, it's a fact, Carlson said, that mass immigration has resulted in the deserts of Arizona becoming covered in garbage. Therefore, his statement that immigration makes our country dirtier is factually true. See? It's not ugly, dehumanizing racism. It's a concern for the environment and a rigorous commitment to the facts. Carlson also repeated a line from his poorer and dirtier monologue, insisting that, hey, these immigrants might be nice people. He assumes they are, in fact. That makes it all better, I guess. It's not that they're intentionally turning our country into a landfill. It's just something they naturally do. They can't help it. They're poor and dirty. It's just the way they are. See? Not so racist now, is he? The thing is, even if Carlson's claim that undocumented immigrants are an environmental disaster is true, if you suddenly profess to care about the environment only when you can leverage it to vilify immigrants while ignoring all of the environmental damage caused by citizens of this country and continually using your platform to amplify the voices of climate change deniers, maybe you're still a piece of shit. Number 4, turns out CBS is a hellish pit of sexual harassment. If 12 seasons of The Big Bang Theory, 37 series of Survivor, and 20 years of the Academy of Country Music Awards aren't enough reasons for you to hate CBS, how about this? It also has a long-standing and pervasive culture of sexual misconduct. That's right, the Branson, Missouri of American TV networks has a dark secret lurking just behind its wholesome facade, just like in a David Lynch movie. And on what network did Lynch's landmark series Twin Peaks originally air? Well, it was ABC, actually, but for some reason I always think it was CBS. Isn't that weird? And the same deal with Star Trek, originally aired on NBC, now owned by CBS. What's that about? Anyway, CBS is a rapey shithole. Indications of the network's sexual harassment problem emerged a little over a year ago when longtime talk show host and 60 Minutes correspondent Charlie Rose was fired after 8 women reported him for making unwanted sexual advances and generally behaving like a gross creep. Then, this past summer, The New Yorker published a report by Ronan Farrow that included accusations from 6 women against CBS chairman Les Moonves. The accusations against Moonves have continued to accumulate since then. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported that Moonves' sexual misconduct was well known among CBS executives and board members who tolerated and acted to cover it up. Sybil Shepherd revealed that her eponymous sitcom, which aired on CBS in the mid to late 90s, was canceled after she refused a sexual advance from Moonves. And week before last, the New York Times reported that Eliza Dushku had settled with the network for $9.5 million after being sexually harassed on the set of Bull by series star Michael Weatherly. All of this is infuriating and depressing, but also sadly typical. Since the long overdue reckoning visited upon Harvey Weinstein last year, it's become obvious to anyone even halfway paying attention how widespread the problem of sexual misconduct is in the entertainment industry. Unfortunately, it is not only CBS. Get it? Because their slogan, only CBS. I'll move on. And now the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and or endanger the United States and the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. NBC News reported what most of us assumed already, that Trump was fully informed and on board with Michael Cohen's plan to pay Trump's former mistress Karen McDougal to keep quiet about their affair before the 2016 election. NBC News confirmed that Trump was in the room when the decision was made to make the hush money payment, or as it's also known, conspiracy to commit campaign finance fraud. Oh, doesn't that have a ring to it? Trump was forced to dissolve his so-called charity, the Trump Foundation, which is currently the target of a lawsuit brought by the Attorney General of New York over what the suit describes as persistently illegal conduct. On Twitter, Trump referred to his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, as a rat. That's right. The President of the United States referred to a person cooperating with a government investigation as a rat, you know, like members of the Gambino crime family called Sammy the Bull a rat when he testified against John Gotti. Just saying. He announced he was withdrawing U.S. forces from Syria, a move that led to the resignation of Secretary of Defense Mattis, who emphasized in his resignation letter how important he felt it was to maintain strong relations with international allies and be, quote, resolute and unambiguous when dealing with countries that are not our allies, like Russia, for example. Trump lied on Twitter about the circumstances of Mattis's resignation, characterizing it as a retirement. He also released a video recorded on the White House lawn announcing the troop withdrawal, claiming that ISIS had been defeated, not true, and declaring, quote, "We won. That's the way we want it, and that's the way they want it," pointing to the sky as if to indicate that the dead soldiers up in heaven are 100% behind his decision. Yeah, no, you don't get to justify your decisions by saying soldiers killed in action agree with me, because A, you don't know that, and B, what the fuck is wrong with you? His re-election campaign released an ad touting the fictional achievements of his presidency and asking supporters to call an 800 number to thank him. The worst president ever is asking people to thank him for the great job he's been doing. That's got to be the most 2018 thing to happen in 2018, right? You can't get more 2018 than that. And finally, the federal government shut down Friday night after Trump refused to sign any legislation to fund the government that did not include money for his border wall. Trump, who a couple of weeks ago had publicly declared that he would proudly shut down the government in order to get funding for his wall, blamed the shutdown on the Democrats. The day before the shutdown, Trump made a statement wherein he referred to coyotes, that is, the people who help migrants to cross the U.S.-Mexico border. Only, I'm pretty sure when Trump said it, he thought he was referring to actual coyotes. It's the way he said, and believe it or not, coyotes, like he was just flabbergasted to learn that even wild desert-dwelling canines were choosing to violate the borders of the United States. But why would Trump be surprised to learn that coyotes were against him? He's already got a reputation for not liking dogs, so why would he expect that dogs, or animals in the same genus as dogs, would like him? I mean, what does he have to offer a dog? What the hell does Trump even have to talk to a dog about? Would he just talk to a dog the same way he talks to humans and start bragging about his accomplishments? If he did that, he would lose the dogs right away. Dogs can smell bullshit. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist. Look after each other. Hey folks, thanks for watching this episode. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, please click like, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month. But if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it, and you pledge $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these fine folks. Antonio Ackridge. Thank you, Antonio. Chip Bush, who just increased his pledge. Thank you, Chip. Austin Cummins, thank you, Austin. Major Tom, thank you, Major Tom. Eric Shepard, thank you, Eric. And Dave Edwards, a longtime patron who also just increased his pledge to $5 a month. Thanks to everybody who is a patron of my channel at whatever level you're pledging and however long you've been pledging. Thanks to all of you for watching. I appreciate your support, whatever form it takes. I'll see you next time. And again, for those of you who celebrate it, Happy Christmas.